Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Avoiding Disaster with Security as a Service. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to you about this new service we've developed at IT Solutions. We hope today's presentation provides helpful information on the latest cyber threats and what to watch out for, as well as, more importantly, what you can do to bolster your company's defenses against them. My name is Jim Higgins, and I run business development for IT Solutions. I'm joined today with my co-presenter, Garrett Graney, President of ITS, along with Justin Ozel, our VP of Network Services. Let me start by saying that when we were putting this webinar together, we were scratching our heads. How could an hour-long presentation do this topic justice? There is so much to talk about in 2021 in regard to cyber threats and cybersecurity. We could probably spend a week on it and still not cover it all, but nobody has that kind of time for such a prolonged discussion. So we're going to do our best to cover the highest of the high points today. We want to provide you with what we see as the most useful information on protecting your systems and data. And of course, we can always arrange for future one-on-one meetings to address your company's specific situation with anybody who's interested. For starters, some background on ITS and specifically what we bring to the table, so to speak, from a security perspective. Since 1994, we've been providing IT support to a variety of small and mid-sized clients headquartered in the Philadelphia region. Our managed service offerings are backed by a dedicated team of professionals who provide 24/7 proactive services, which includes ongoing monitoring, patching, backup, and other critical network security protections. Our team includes highly experienced CISSP expertise. CISSP stands for Certified Information Systems Security Professional. I know, quite a mouthful. ITS compliance credentials include SSAE 18 Type 2 and PCI, and all of our staff are trained on HIPAA best practices as it relates to healthcare systems and data. Healthcare happens to be one of our largest client sectors, along with other regulated industries, including pharma and financial services. We also work with over 30 law firms in the region who service a number of similar clients in these industries. So they rely on us to assist their security compliance efforts to help serve their clients better. Since 2008, we've offered a highly secure, fully managed private hosting service called NearCloud. And in 2015, we launched a new suite of security tools called the IT Secure Plus plan. IT Secure Plus was developed to address emerging threats at that time. And it helped us develop this latest security as a service offering that we're introducing to you today. At IT Solutions, while we are immersed every day doing all that we can to protect client systems, as a rule, we don't want to sell fear as some kind of business opportunity. What we strive for here is awareness. And with this, we talk about cybersecurity as a strategic focus for every business. We emphasize that this focus must be ongoing and recognized and even embraced, starting with the C-suite and made a priority throughout the company. With this in mind, we wanted to provide some background on what things look like currently from a threat perspective, to emphasize how persistent and prevalent these threats are. We think this will help to make clear why traditional technology tools of years past are no longer adequate to deal with what's out there today. So, number one, every 39 seconds, a new attack is launched on systems somewhere around the world. Second, every day, not every week or month, but daily, more than 250,000 new malware variants make it onto the scene. The average ransomware payment small businesses are hit with is about $133,000, but that's just the payment itself. What about the overall cost in terms of lost productivity, having to pay consultants to help clean up a mess and do forensics, possibly replace systems, not to mention the cost of reputation if it has to be made known to clients and maybe the public. And by the way, this 133,000 is just an average. We have heard of small businesses getting hit with seven-figure ransoms as high as $1.5 million and having to pay this to get their data back. The increase due to the pandemic isn't surprising. The increase in cyber attacks and cybercrime isn't surprising. But 600% is a pretty astounding number. This is in no small part due to way too much use of people working from home on home PCs and related equipment. And also the general letting down of the guard and getting burned by an increase in phishing attempts, which of course, these attempts were conveniently tailored to COVID and the Paycheck Protection Program scams. 80%, 8 out of 10 companies experienced an event of some kind last year. And of these, more than half reported that their customers were directly impacted in a negative way. How do you walk that back and keep those clients after such an incident? 200 days. More than 6 months is the average number of days before a company knows they've been breached. The damage that can get done and the havoc that could be wreaked with a bad actor having that kind of extended access is incredible. 60%, over half of small businesses that are breached don't recover. And a significant portion of these businesses are out of business within 6 months of an incident. And what about the human toll? Almost a third of breaches that happen today wind up with someone or multiple individuals losing their jobs. What's the cost of finding, training, and maintaining their replacements? Last, but certainly not least, there's no getting around it. The damage done to a company's reputation is 100% if that company has to notify staff, vendors, clients, or worst of all, have it made known to the public through the media. The damage could last for years, assuming the company is still around at that point. This chart shows the top 15 threats, cyber threats, that we saw in 2020. You don't need to work in IT to recognize a number of these threats. Most of them have been around for years, but some are much more prevalent than others. Take phishing, for example, which delivers 94% of the malware today through links and attachments that people click and wind up downloading to devices and networks. Also highlighted here, malware and web-based attacks. 1 in 13 web requests made today leads to malware making its way from a nefarious site, masked to look like a legitimate site, which winds up in a user's browser and then down to the PC and possibly across the network. So while many of these are likely familiar, we wanted to take a few minutes to highlight some of them that are more emerging threats that might not be as well known, to help raise awareness and emphasize why a new level of comprehensive protection is so necessary today. Number one, mobile devices. So increasingly, users are more likely to respond to a phishing attack on a mobile device than on a desktop, partly because a phone is where people most likely are to see a message first. More and more phishing attacks also occur in text messages, along with other social media services and games. Unfortunately, mobile apps and fraud go hand in hand. Why? Because the apps generate a large amount of revenue for bad actors and cyber criminals. These bad actors follow the money, so it's not surprising they found ways to pump cash from mobile ad revenue streams. Ad fraud can take various forms, but the most common is the use of malware for generating ad clicks that seem to be coming from a legitimate user using a legitimate website or app. A mobile device is only as secure as the network it's connected to. Prior to the pandemic, of course, when people were connecting to public Wi-Fi networks, out of the office, in restaurants, in coffee shops and whatnot, many users would unwittingly connect to an open Wi-Fi network. And by doing so, they can compromise devices and the data therein. Insider attacks shadow IT. We should not overlook these. And I want to say a few words about them. Our employees are our biggest assets, but they can be our biggest threat. We have to pay particular attention to privileged users, vendors, and those who have left our companies, especially those who might have been terminated. Shadow IT is defined as products or services that are on the network without consent or knowledge of management. A few common examples of shadow IT would be an employee who leverages software like Dropbox to make their job easier. But what data are they uploading to Dropbox? And what are they downloading from Dropbox without knowledge of IT or management? Similar example would be someone subscribing to a software as a service account or application without permission from corporate IT or their manager. And how do we know where that application is really being hosted? Without it being vetted, how do you even know if it's a secure application? What if it's configured to push and pull data from other approved systems that the company uses? How do you know that that's not being compromised? In these software scenarios, it's very possible individuals could be doing it out of convenience or efficiency, not maliciously, but regardless of the intent, it's risky and can wreak havoc if data gets into the wrong hands. Here's another one. An employee setting up unauthorized cameras in an office that could be recording user screens and that data making its way outside the company. Of course, it's much different than the software as a service and Dropbox examples, but it's also potentially quite damaging and could likely be harder to detect. Cryptojacking is another emerging threat, and it's defined as unauthorized use of someone's computer to mine cryptocurrency. Hackers do this by either getting the victim to click on a malicious link in an email that loads crypto mining code in the computer, or by infecting a website or online ad with JavaScript code that auto-executes once loaded in the victim's browser. Unfortunately, cryptojacking is becoming more popular with hackers because it generates more money for less risk. Hackers see cryptojacking as a cheaper, more profitable alternative to ransomware. With ransomware, a hacker might get 3 people to pay for every 100 computers infected. With cryptojacking, all 100 of the affected machines work for the hacker to mine cryptocurrency. Cryptojacking can continually generate money, and the risk of being caught or identified is less than with ransomware. A telltale sign that a computer has been cryptojacked, if that's a word, is a noticeable change in the processing speed of a PC. If you start to notice significant and steady slowness on a machine, it's very possible that cryptojacking or some other breach is underway. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Garrett to take over, and I'll be back at the end to talk about some takeaways and to handle some of the Q&A. Garrett, take it away.
Thanks, Jim. Much appreciated. And thank you, everybody, for attending today. Listen, I just want to second a couple of things that Jim has already said. Number one, today's presentation could easily be a week-long presentation. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of these types of events that we can share with you. In a 45-minute to a 60-minute presentation, we can't share them all. So please understand that today is really focused on brevity. Secondly, the hackers are doing this for one reason and one reason only. They are making money at it. It is a great business for them. It is terrible for anybody on the receiving end of their actions. And more, those actions are getting more and more expensive and more damaging to an organization. So I think that we can do a quick review of what security used to be and how you should really be securing your network in today's threat environment. So if we went back in time and we were able to go back just 8 years, we'd find that a simple multi-layered approach was the way to go, the way to manage your network security. You might have some type of limited spam filtering. You would have antivirus. You would have a firewall that was in place that would block traffic. And if the bad guys couldn't get in, of course you were protected. And then we'd also have good solid data backups. And that covered about 95% of your security needs. Sure, there was more that could be done and technology did exist, but it was always very expensive. Today, that probably covers about 25% of your security needs. So if this is all you're doing, then while we don't want to sell fear, we do want you to be a little bit concerned about what's happening on your network. So some advanced components of security that we have today, but still don't cover everything that is needed, would be email security encryption. When you're sending emails about somebody's paycheck, or you have social security numbers for a new hire, or you have account numbers for clients to transfer money, you absolutely don't want that information sitting unprotected in your email. So we can encrypt that email. And don't forget about the mobile devices. It is convenient today. And Jim had mentioned a 600% increase in hacker activity due to the pandemic. And what's happening is the work from home devices. He had mentioned the PC, but also the mobile device. And if your staff is using their own mobile device and it has business data on it, realize that that data is really now theirs, because you have no rights to the mobile device that they're using, whether it's a tablet or a phone. There are tools if you want to do this properly, and it's called mobile device management, and it gives you the ability to basically split the phone, half for business, half for personal use. And at any point, you can control what's happening on the business side. If you don't have this, that data on their phone is their data, and there's no getting it back if they choose not to give it back to you. We have advanced filtering and controls that allow people to have access to applications today. You only have certain permissions. Those permissions became more and more manageable over time. We have custom block lists on the firewall. We have designated user safety. And one of the greatest things, but again, not a panacea or a silver bullet, is multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication started off for most of us as you had to have a username, a password, a PIN, and something about you. It could be a fingerprint, it could be a facial ID, it could be a 30-second expiring code, but it was unique to you. And those 4 things would get you into your PC. But once in your PC, if a bad actor was on it, they'd have access to everything that you have. So one of the things that we want to see in the advancement of the multi-factor authentication is for all the applications that control critical data for your organization, financial, client-based, staff-based, HR, you need to have 2-factor authentication to get into those applications as well. So when you log onto your machine, you use multi-factor authentication. When you log into banking, you use multi-factor authentication. When you log into your HR, multi-factor authentication. And this is one of the best ways to secure your network. Moving on to where we think you need to be is with a SIM. And I'll explain what a SIM is in a moment. But it is an all-encompassing, and it's some of the best protection that can be offered today. And the bad actors are more and more technology savvy. They are figuring out how to get into your network. And if you think you don't have data they want, Jim explained, that's not true. Any data that they can glean from you, they can do damage with. And more importantly, they just need your machine to commit other crimes, which will be damaging as well and create an awful lot of headache. So I think an example that I have today that we can all agree on is the physical security of an office building. This has been a tried and true practice for many, many years. And let's take a quick look at it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to prevent somebody from breaking and entering and stealing. And so you have a front door, big solid front door, back door as well, of course. You have locks on those doors, and you control the ingress and egress of people going through those doors with your ability to lock the door. You want to detect if anybody's in there. So you leave the office building, 6 o'clock, it's locked up tight, but how do you know that nobody's trying to get in? Well, you have sensors. So should somebody have motion inside or break glass, that's going to trigger an alert. You have cameras that record everything that happens in your absence. You have alarm systems that will alert personnel or police to the fact, and you for that matter, that somebody is breaking into your building. And lastly, you want to monitor. Now, you don't want to sit at home constantly watching the alarm system, waiting for something to happen. So you generally hire a company who's going to watch that network and make sure that nobody is breaking into your building. And if they have an intrusion, they're going to let you and the authorities know. And this is pretty common. And my point here, and the most important point, is that it's not one thing that you're doing. It's a multitude of things. And of course, there's many add-ons to any security system. This is pretty simplistic in nature. But you get the idea that in order to secure a building, it is multiple components. Well, if we take that same approach and we apply it to your network, you would look something like this. If we want to prevent access to the network, we'd have firewall and antivirus, and that is going to, at least from where the internet joins your network, stop somebody from just walking through unannounced and doing as they please. If somebody downloaded a file that had a virus, and please understand, we could spend a day talking about just the differences between viruses and malware, because it is fairly distinct in nature, but both do damage to the network. We'd also want to detect what's happening on the network. So we would have network sensors. Maybe we're looking for a high flow of traffic going outbound at unique times. So in the middle of the night, it might be common for a high flow of outbound traffic because you're backing up to a remote site. But in the middle of the day, to have all of that data flowing out doesn't make sense. So you'd want an alert letting you know. You might also have log aggregation, and the logs are like your video camera. Video camera tells you everything that happened in your absence for a specific area. That's exactly what logs do. They are bulky. They record everything from applications to operating systems to security components to your, if we took your most common application, your financial, every transaction has a log entry so that you know how it happened. You can replay the logs and build a set of activities that took place. So you want all of this to be taking place in addition to the antivirus, the malware protection, the firewall components that are there. And lastly, you want the same. You want a security operations center that is watching all of this and going to let you know when there is a problem on your network. So how do we do this? What are the components that make this happen? I had mentioned earlier the SIM, and a SIM is security, information, and event management. It is all of those things on that last slide bundled together as one and more. In the IT solution SIM, and there are many out there, we have advanced antivirus that really is going to notice not only whether or not a file has a virus in it, but also some of the activities of the viruses. We're going to have network auditing taking place. And in that network auditing, that is the file aggregation. If you've ever looked at a log file, they are boring. The phone book might be more exciting to read, and they are time consuming. It's hard to distinguish what's a problem, what's not a problem. So this network auditing that takes place looks at all the logs, and you have thousands of them on your network, trust me. If not thousands, at least hundreds of them on your network. Dark web monitoring for your domain. We are itsolutions-inc.com. We can look for garrett.graney at itsolutions-inc.com, and it will tell you any instance where maybe passwords and accounts are associated with that email address. When somebody steals your information, sometimes they can go and do damage and acquire more money just from the information that they have, or they can sell it, or they can do both. And when they sell it to the dark web, they receive a very small sum of money, which is why they want thousands and thousands of accounts when they can get them, so that they can make a big payday. So this dark web monitoring in an ongoing manner will tell you if any of your accounts are showing up in the unsavory portions of the internet. Multi-factor authentication and ongoing user training. The last two probably make up a large portion of the security today. Where I had said earlier, 95% was covered by the firewall, antivirus, and a few other things. Probably 50% or more is covered by multi-factor authentication and ongoing user training. But those two things alone are not enough. It is the comprehensive service that you are looking to engage in here to protect your network, your assets, your people, and your customers. So when you're out looking for a SIM, here is what you want to look for. You want a team of security analysts. watching your network 24/7. That is the critical piece. It can't just be from 7 to 7. That won't cut it. You want to stop these intrusions. So Jim had mentioned that it can be as much as 6 months before you find out that you've had an intrusion on your network. If you go 6 days, walking it back is near impossible. 6 hours, you have a better chance. And so that is what you're looking to do, is reduce the time to finding out about your network being either hacked or an intruder on the network or somebody stealing information. You need an unlimited data allowance for your SIM. Remember those files that I had mentioned? They can be bulky. And if you had to go back even 2 months to find out what happened, you need to store an awful lot of data in those log files. Now, unlimited is a bit of a misnomer. That's not unlimited in perpetuity. What you'll generally do is you'll buy a period of time. You might buy 3 months worth of unlimited storage or 6 months worth of unlimited storage. And then as a log file becomes 3 months or 6 months old, it's deleted from the system. So you can only ever go back. Now, here's the downside. If you had 3 months unlimited storage and you had an intrusion that took place 5 months ago, you will never fully understand how they got in, why they got in, and what it is that they did. So the longer period of time you can store that data, the better, but you're really looking to reduce the point in time that you find out that there's been a bad actor on your network. You want multiple best of breed threats. You don't want just IT solutions and the IT solutions threat database. It's not enough. You need to pull from global companies who are doing this, whether it's Department of Justice, the FBI makes some of this public. There are companies out there who have threat databases and they're monitoring all the time. When 300,000 become available, new variants become available each day, it is far more than any one team can document. And so you really need to have your threat coverage from multiple best of breed sources. You need retention of the user systems, event logs, the Microsoft Office 365 logs or Google logs, whatever cloud you're using. You need to make sure you have that information. Have you ever had an employee leave? And you think, well, this seems up and up. It happens. You know, we never like to lose a good person, but did they take any data? Is there any way to find out? And it's never a clear answer. With a SIM, it becomes a very clear answer. We can tell you exactly what they had touched in the weeks leading up, whether or not data was moved, whether or not files were copied to personal computers. So we would have some of that information. You need monitoring backed by world-class security operations center. We talked about this, but you need enough people. It can't be just some guy who's drifting off to sleep in his home office. You need a network of people who are watching so that you know that you're getting the best coverage that you can possibly get. And you need low operational costs. But listen, you can get what you pay for. You could certainly, when you do a web search for SIMs, find one that's maybe half the price of all the others out there. But what it's going to require is you set up your own security operations center, hire your own professionals. That cost, it can be misleading. So that's why we say, look for the following items when you look for a SIM. So just real quick, in today's coverage, when you are looking for a SIM, you still need all of the other things that we have had and the SIM offering on top. And that will give you best of breed protection for what we consider to be the small and medium-sized business here in the Mid-Atlantic region. It used to be unaffordable. It's no longer the case. It's very affordable. And so if you don't have a SIM today, we suggest that you should look into a SIM offering. Now, what do you get from the SIM? This is just a couple of quick reports, but contrasting the true positive threats that are happening on your network to the false positives. And again, this is the digestion of all the monitoring, all the log file watching. False positives are not uncommon. In fact, they are far more common than true security threats. And that's the toughest part of this, weeding through those logs and understanding what is real and what is only an opportunity for improvement. Here we see a quick dashboard threats, what the actions being taken are on those threats, who's been notified. This is an escalated alerts board that you would see in a SIM solution. This happens to be from our SIM solution. Again, you get those traffic control components. You get the network up and down times. You get the sightings by community, who's seeing what activity across the globe reported. An interesting one that we see, and most people can really relate to, is showing logins. So if you're using Office 365 or other components of a cloud, so Google again fits this, Google Office Space fits this criteria, it will show you where users are logging in to your network and where they've been blocked. So we see that there's been users logging in from California. That may make perfect sense because we have employees who are attending a conference out there, or we have employees who are working from remote offices in that location. It makes perfect sense. But over in France and Belgium and Italy, we see that people tried to log in but couldn't. And that could be because either they didn't have the right credentials, or we had geofencing, and we just know that there are no employees in that area and there's no reason anybody should be logging on. So we'll never allow a login from that location. And this will give you a good idea as to whether or not the right people are logging into your network. If somebody logged in from Miami and all employees were in the office or at home, and you don't have employees down in Florida, that's a concern. It quickly highlights areas of concern from the login. All right. If we were in a wellness care center, this is the time that I ask you to close your eyes and visualize. But it's also a time to reflect on what's being done on your network. So just take a moment as I read out some of these questions and see what you are experiencing on your network. First one here, what are you doing to monitor work from home activities? I think we could all say today that the work from home has been a success. Our businesses are still up and running. People are able to work from home. But if they are using home equipment and home devices, are they patched on a regular basis? Do they have any type of security? All the money your organization has spent on security can quickly be circumvented if a home user is able to connect. And a bad actor is on their machine. Once they connect to your network, they have a fairly clean path over to your network to set up shop. It happens far more than you would think. What are you doing today for cybersecurity detection? What is the component that you're using that says, if we have a cybersecurity threat, I know we're going to know about it? If you're expecting a company like IT Solutions to tell you, we certainly will when it happens. But without these tools, it can be 2 months, 2 weeks. It can be 6 months if it is just a low-grade intrusion. So it takes an awful lot of time with standard methods. Without these tools, it's very hard to tell if there's been an intrusion on your network. How do you identify and respond to threats? If you say, well, my IT company will do that, maybe, but I think that we're making a very strong case today that without these tools in place, they are going to be reacting the same way as you. And in fact, many of the stories we hear, it is not the IT company who identifies it. It's somebody who sees something unusual in an application or a slowness of their machine, as Jim had talked about. What threat intelligence are you leveraging for your network, if any? So what databases are you pulling from? And it looks like I skipped one here. How are you currently logging and reviewing all of your logs? Trust me, you're not. If your answer is not, you're using a SIM, you're not doing that. The logs are in place, and yes, we can go back to them. And in some cases, they're kept for a long period of time. But by default, most logs are only kept for a couple of weeks on servers and end user machines. So this is why that log aggregation over time is so critical. And then lastly, do you have a security operations center or incident response team? Do you have somebody who's really watching this 24/7, calling, alerting you, waking you up in the absence of somebody being on site? This is how you need to protect a network today. This is the advancement in security that's taking place. And there are a number of ways to get it. IT Solutions also offers this. And I suppose I will close with um, IT solutions. You do not have to be a current client in order to engage in the SIM component of our offering. You can engage IT solutions just for the SIM if that was a desire. So, Jim, that concludes my portion. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Garrett. I'm going to go over some takeaways today before we wrap up and move on to some Q&A. So unfortunately, there seems to be no limit to the number and persistence of threats out there, and it only looks like they'll continue to grow in 2021. This is in large part because so many hackers make substantial amounts of money from the efforts, which in many cases is easier to manage and much less costlier than you would think. As we hope we've made it abundantly clear today, tools like up-to-date antivirus, anti-malware solutions, and good backup are just not enough anymore to keep your system safe. One really positive takeaway that we hope you got from today was the point that Garrett made that the SIM offering is no longer out of reach for small and mid-sized firms. And that's obviously why we were able to offer it, because that's our primary client base. What used to be priced and built to work exclusively in enterprise environments is now tailored to the size clients we work with every day. All the automated systems we put in place can do a lot to prevent a breach, but the need for awareness and not letting our guards down as users doesn't go away just because the tools have been upgraded. That's why ongoing training and things like training phishing attempts to remind users what to watch out for are so important to keep into the mix. We understand that work from home posed many challenges for businesses and employees. One strong recommendation we made over and over to clients this past year was to please, wherever possible, provide your employees with company-owned PCs and laptops. Home equipment is just such a wild card. Old machines, multiple users, systems not patched, etc. It's really just not worth the risk. Assume that every business is a target these days, so please don't think that maybe since you haven't had an incident or an incident that caused a major disruption, that you're somehow immune. Step up your protection before it's too late. The potential costs, including reputation, as we talked about earlier, far outweigh what you'll pay for upping your detection and your monitoring. As Garrett said, with all of our managed service support plans, you don't need to sign up for anything long-term with us to get this offering. And as Garrett said, you don't need to even be a managed services client of ITS. Our solution is conveniently priced on a per user basis, so it really scales appropriately to the size of your organization. Finally, we are here to help at IT Solutions. If you're interested in this service specifically, great. Let's schedule a time to discuss in more detail. Or if you would just like more insight on cybersecurity and cyber threats in general, we're happy to discuss that with you too. My email is on the next slide. Feel free to shoot me a message and we can set up a time to talk. All right, so let's get to some questions with my colleague, Justin. Justin, first question today. Does this service also monitor IoT devices, network printers, and workstations?
Sure. So yes, many network devices are able to be monitored. Workstations running Windows or Mac OS are, of course, very important to include and are among the first devices that get added. For a lot of the other things like network printers, IoT devices, if the device is capable of providing an event log that we can forward or ingest into the SIM, then yes, we can include it. A lot of business class and enterprise class equipment is able to generate event logs, which Garrett had mentioned earlier. Lower end equipment, consumer grade equipment, things that you might buy on sale at Best Buy, things like that are a lot less likely to generate event logs and probably won't provide a lot of extra information for the SIM.
Okay. Next question, what's involved in setting something like this up and how long does it take to set up?
Well, we roll the different aspects of the program out in intervals so we don't overwhelm users with the changes we're making or potentially create technical problems. Every rollout is a little different given that each client is a little bit different, and we try to tailor the rollout based on their needs. At a high level, we generally come in and start setting up things on the back end, such as the log captures and forwarding, antivirus changes, things that are a lot more transparent to users. Then as we proceed with that, we'll roll things out where we're setting up alerts, learning what's noise on the network, what's a false alarm. User trainings provided for some of the changes along the way, such as MFA, which can be multi-factor authentication, which can be very impactful to users, as I'm sure some people have seen. And we're generally going to try and get the whole thing rolled out within about 30 days, though again, depending on the size of the client and the environment we're talking about, that can take a little bit less time. It can take a little bit more time.
Okay. So speaking of MFA, multi-factor authentication, what if I already have, somebody asked, what if I already have MFA or my own antivirus solution?
Well, I hope everybody has their own antivirus solution already, and preferably some MFA. We do prefer to use our own, but we can make adjustments. Our team is trained on the tools that we see most often, and the SIM and some of the other products we use, they have integrations built in that make the products work together more seamlessly. But if somebody has something in place that we can take advantage of, that's certainly something we can talk about. It's just from our experience, we get better results if we utilize the tool sets that our team's trained on, sees every day, and just knows their way around very well. So again, we can tailor it as needed. If somebody has an antivirus or MFA that is going to work perfectly with the solution, it's not an issue.
Okay. Next question. If we want to monitor just one specific service, such as Office 365, can we do that with this?
Definitely. If an organization has already moved much of their data, their critical data, into 365 or G Suite, for example, which would mean for most people email and files, that would be files that traditionally are like on a file server, as well as files that would be more in your user drive, then if that organization has determined their risk is mitigated by moving that data into the tenant, then tenant-only monitoring could absolutely meet their needs.
Okay. Are there other things we should think about protecting behind a SIM besides the things that you guys already covered in this webinar?
Sure. So like I mentioned earlier, there's some integrations exist with the SIM and other products, and of course they're always working on expanding that. And even if the integration is not there, there are platforms and services that will generate the logs that we can still utilize. A good example of something that is maybe I'll call it standalone or in the cloud. It isn't necessarily in someone's environment or with someone's hosted environment, would be something like Salesforce. So if someone was leveraging Salesforce as a CRM, it can potentially be added to the protection and further strengthen security. If someone is going to choose to roll out a SIM, whether it's ours or someone else's, I would say cast a wide net and see what else can be added. Not everyone's going to be asking the questions about things like Salesforce. So I would mention anything where you have critical data. Is this something that can be added to the SIM? And sometimes the answer will definitely be yes. And sometimes the answer is maybe not entirely, but we can at least protect a portion of it.
Okay. How long can I store logs in the SIM?
So anywhere from 30 days up, 30 days, 90 days, 1 year, they do longer. Kind of depends on what the need is of the organization. Everything is stored in hot or warm storage for the first year, so it's easily searchable. And after that, we move it to a different kind of storage for longer retention periods, like HIPAA, and some financial firms have a different kind of 7-year plus retention policy.
Okay, we have time for a couple more here. Do you recommend an internet security application, I guess, for a home computer? And what about an application for storing passwords?
So for a internet security program, I'm going to assume the question is about like a Trend Micro or a Webroot that they offer a suite, a package that will do real-time scanning, email protection, some other things like that. And I would say if you have a computer, you should definitely have antivirus on it. And if you can afford a stronger protection from a reputable company, that's definitely something worth doing. What was the second part of that question, Jim?
Do you recommend a password application?
Oh, right.
What password applications, I guess, do we recommend?
Sure. So definitely I recommend a password management tool of some sort. I don't think Post-it notes and storing it in your browser forever are good solutions these days. Everybody should know that. But we're always encouraged to have different passwords, stronger passwords, and that can be very difficult to keep track of. So yes, I actually use several different password management tools. One for personal. I have some for work that are not tied to the main line of business application, so that we have layered security and we can protect in various avenues. We see everything from 1Password, LastPass, Dashlane, there's KeyPass, MyKey. There's a lot of different ones out there. I think the most important thing is if you are picking up a security product and you don't have a trusted advisor or someone that you can lean on, like an MSP or maybe a director of IT, to do the research for you. Find out what you can about the company. Make sure it's not from a country that is on a list that the government puts out saying, we should be careful about these countries and what they publish. Make sure that if it's on work machines, that it doesn't necessarily violate a contract you might have. The best example is there was a point where Kaspersky Antivirus, which is questionable as to whether it's state-owned, but is definitely Russian in origin, was basically removed from a lot of companies because the government wasn't going to allow it anymore, and they had government contracts and they had to remove it. So just do your due diligence, do some research, make sure you know what you're signing up for.
Okay, great. Last one for today. What does something like this cost?
So like a lot of things these days, the billing mechanism mainly depends on user count. So you should think about how many people are being protected rather than just like what devices or areas of the business are being protected. And I always say you don't really pick and choose who you're protecting. It's an all or nothing approach. You don't layer it through key people. You just have everybody protected. You get a nice look at the entire network. Depending on the complexity of what's being monitored, ongoing monthly costs typically land anywhere between $15 and $50. Certainly they can be more, certainly they could be less.
Okay. All right. Well, that's really all we have time for today. So as we said, so thank you, Justin. Thank you, Garrett. If anyone has follow-up questions, or as I've said previously during the course of the webinar, if you'd like to chat, set up a time to talk more about security in general, or specifically about this service, we, of course, more than welcome that. And my email is here. Feel free to just shoot me a message, and we'll make time to set up a time to speak with you. And again, we appreciate everybody's time joining us today. We will have a recording of this up shortly for anybody who missed it or anybody who was on the call and would like to share it with any of their colleagues. So stay tuned for that. And thanks again, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.